Good evening, ladies and gents, and welcome back to our third gallop around the vineyards of England. And again, I'm absolutely delighted to be joined by Kieran Atkinson from the English Wine Project, who is great with his technical detail on these things, and a winemaker himself, of course. And my old friend, writer, broadcaster, and author of English Wine, Oz Clarke. Now, Kieran, Kieran's thrown us an absolute curveball here because we're going to start our journey in Battersea, a railway arch in Battersea, with a wine made by an American with an Italian name. So, Oz, let's get cracking.
Yeah, we're not going to do any much cantering and galloping. It's inside the congestion charge, from what I can make out.
Absolutely right, yeah.
You go for a free tasting at this place, it probably costs you 15 quid to park your car. Now, this is a wonderful operation. Oh yeah, good idea, Charlie. Let's open it. It's called GMF, by the way, this wine. I know exactly what GMF stands for. If any of you who are John Grant fans, the singer, you'll know what GMF stands for as well. I am not prepared to say precisely what it means on mixed video, because mixed company rather. But the thing about this is it's just this fantastic guy, Sergio. Now, did you hear that? Just a lovely little.
Yep, I'm just getting mine open now.
What do you guys think of the Crown Cup?
I think the Crown Cup is a brilliant idea. Partly that's the Crown Cup there. That's what came off here. Maybe because it is completely, Charlie.
Quite perky, this one.
Where have you been keeping that? In the central heating system? Mine was incredibly well behaved. I think the Crown Cap is just another way of saying I'm being innovative. I am making a wine which is well away from the rules of champagne type wines. The Crown Cap is actually, to be honest, nearly every champagne in the business spends 2 or 3 years under a Crown Cap when it's getting the bubbles going through a second fermentation anyway. And I just think this says something about being classless, being outside the wine establishment, and I'm all in favor. And look at that. Hey,
gorgeous.
Just stopped in time.
Yes, you've got your favourite glass out there, Oz. Well, I think this is a great glass of wine.
Wedding day glass.
Lovely glass of wine.
And what is a blend of this wine? Is this it's a classic grape variety? Is this Chardonnay, Pinot Meunier, or?
It's the fantastic Céval Blanc.
Céval Blanc, which we've been talking about.
I think Céval Blanc gets a bad rap in this country. I think it's a really important grape variety. It's easier to ripen than Chardonnay and Pinot Noir is. It's able to stand up to a lot of the diseases that we get in this country, particularly the ones from dampness and the whole maritime climate. You know, we're surrounded by 6 weather systems here. Every single one of them wants to buffet us whenever it can. So gives you a good crop, it ripens easily, and it resists disease, and it tastes different from Chardonnay and Pinot Noir. And I think wine buffs say, oh, that's the problem with it. I would say it's not a problem. A tasting difference is its strength, not its problem.
But Oz, you know, being a Yorkshireman, you know, I don't get down to London all that often, of course. So the railway arches of Battersea, whereabouts are these grapes grown? Where the grapes come from for this wine? The grapes,
well, this again is this wonderful thing about Sergio. He's very environmentally aware, and he says he doesn't want any of his grapes to come from more than about 2 hours drive from his winery in Battersea. These come from the Yew Tree Vineyard, and that is at Didcot. Now, Didcot's a railway junction. It's got an old power station. You think, Didcot, I know Didcot. I don't know any vines. Well, I don't, but I do know that at Didcot, those great big rolling hills around Didcot are all that chalk that's running around from the Chilterns and is going to head off up into Norfolk and Suffolk and Lincolnshire and all this, and comes from Sussex and Kent and Hampshire. It's the same stuff. And Didcot has got tons of that chalk. I don't know where this Yew Tree Vineyard is. Next time I'm up in Didcot way, I'm going to find out. But
well, that was a great start. Great start. Well done, Sergio. Now we're going to move on now
do you like the cloudiness?
Yes,
I
yeah,
love that clouds. Again, screw cap, cloudy. It says something about I'm outside the mainstream.
yeah,
That's
yeah.
exactly what Sergio does so well. I'm outside the mainstream. I'm making a cool dudes, sort of East London, trendy kind of sparkling wine. And it also says, don't take me too seriously. Crack the crown cork off, whack it in a tooth
Yeah.
mug, knock it back when you're sitting down by the river near Battersea.
I think what's so
Well-
exciting as well about Seyval Blanc is the amount of crop you can get on the vine. So ultimately, you might get double the amount of Seyval to Chardonnay, combined with disease resistance, combined with more sugar, combined with balanced acidity. Actually makes it a great option to make sparkling wine with.
And
So we're on to the Pinot Noir. Let's get on.
Charlie, oh, you old Pinot Noir.
I love it. Love it.
Okay, I'll move on to that. I'll tell you what I did with this one, Charlie, because Sergio said, please decant the wine.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
So what I did is I took the cork out of that and I gave it a good old shake.
yeah.
Because if you
So,
can't,
why would you do that? Why would
What?
you do that?
and I did it because Sergio said he thought there was a little bit of dissolved carbon dioxide in the wine, which is a great idea because Sergio tries to use as little sulfur dioxide as humanly possible. He obviously, again, he's a fantastic winemaker. If he needs to do things like sulfur, he will, but he likes to reduce the sulfur. But carbon dioxide let me start. Sulfur stops oxygen getting into the wine, and oxygen is what causes vinegar and staleness and tiredness. Carbon dioxide does exactly the same job, but sulfur tastes and carbon dioxide doesn't. So what he's done is leave a little bit of carbon dioxide in the wine so that when it goes right up to the cork there, it's actually, there's a little carbon dioxide stopping oxygen getting in, keeping the wine fresh. The Germans have been making wine like this for 30 or 40 years. I think it's an excellent way to keep the wine fresh, but it does mean you might have a tiny prickle when you pour it. Frankly, a young Pinot Noir, I don't mind if I've got a tiny prickle in a young Pinot Noir. Oh God, look, Charlie, that colour.
I think one of the really exciting things about Sergio's
Unbelievable, isn't it?
is that he uses so many natural indigenous yeast he has within the winery itself. Can you taste the difference between those yeasts?
Well, it's interesting because, of course, this whole thing about natural yeast, people go on a lot about it, but dominant yeasts will attach themselves in a winery to bits of wood, bits of concrete, bits of brick, bits of anything they can find. And so you might say, oh, I'm bringing in my wonderful grapes from Oxfordshire with their own special yeasts on them. If those own special yeasts aren't as strong as the ones that have just come from Essex or just come from Sussex, they're going to be whacked away. The thing about own yeasts is that at least they start the fermentation of. A lot of own yeasts are only relevant for the first 3 or 4% of alcohol, and they're often finished off with a more powerful yeast which gets into a winery and stays there. Now, I suspect that might well have happened with this one. I don't know what his first wine was. Do you, Kieran?
I'm not sure. I mean, Sergio's traveled the world, obviously refining his skill and his art. So it's just exciting, I think, from his ethos to be kind of mixing that blend of science with art history.
Because one of the things you get from indigenous wild yeasts, if you're lucky, and look, some people won't have a wild yeast in their winery. I know some excellent winemakers who absolutely will not let any wild yeast into their winery because they say they're terrible. They know they've got a vineyard which has got good grapes but rubbish yeasts. So this idea that everything must be wild yeast is nonsense. But basically, that if you get the wild yeast in, what they do seem to give is a textural difference. But I think you often lose a bit of perfume and gain texture. And I'm a great believer in perfume in wine, but I think Sergio here has done both.
Yeah, it's good. It's good wine. Good wine. And Sergio is absolutely right. It does need to be decanted. I think this probably in half an hour will taste completely different.
Mine's had half.
And very, very much better. So, Oz, I think we need to get the horse out of the...
I just want to say this to Charlie. This is as good a Pinot Noir as I've had all year from England.
Yeah, brilliant.
Really tremendous. And it's Essex fruit.
Essex fruit. So I think we need to get the horse out of the stable and back into the saddle, because we're going to saddle ourselves up and get down the A4 and get into Laurie Lee sided with Rosie country. We're now just outside Stroud at the Woodchester Valley winery, and the first wine we're going to try, Oz, I think it's their Brut Rosé.
Yeah. And this should be exciting. This is 90% Pinot Noir and 10% Pinot Meunier. So
I'm very much looking forward to this.
Again, the Pinot Noir grape at work, and that's very much the classic way of what they call Blanc de Noir.
Yeah.
And I would expect Woodchester on some really fascinating vineyard land right on the edge of the Cotswold, where it tumbles down into the Severn Valley, would be able to make really good Pinot Noirs.
We've got a question from Bobby Fox in Godalming. Does climate change help or hinder English wines? And he does say, clearly it's a bad thing, but curious to know your thoughts.
Well, my feeling is that climate change is climate chaos, and you only have to look at in this country at 2018, 2019, and 2020 so far to realize that we simply can't predict anything anymore.
No.
I think in most of the world, if we don't deal with it, it's going to be catastrophic. And indeed, it's going to bring catastrophe of various forms to some parts of the British Isles. But the English vineyards are going to be enormous beneficiaries and have been. It's not just they will be. What's happening now as to what's happening 20 years ago is absolutely dramatically different. And when you look at something like, remember May, only a month or so ago, May 2020 was the sunniest ever month, not the sunniest ever May, the sunniest ever month recorded.
Yeah, but Oz, it's all very well saying that the more sunshine, but then we're going to get bigger showers. And May the 4th and 5th, we had an amazing frost that killed off most of the. I don't know how it affected the vines in the vineyards of England, but it just killed off a load of plants. So climate change is something that we can talk about it, but it's terribly difficult to predict.
Climate chaos, Charlie. But they knew the frost was coming, and there wasn't a single big vineyard and major producer who lost more than 5, 6, 7% of their.
Well, these guys at Woodchester actually put fires in there, knowing that the frost was coming. Put fires in all their vines. There's a great photograph on their website about it.
And Charlie, the beauty of Woodchester is also how they planted the vineyards. So if you ever get opportunity to go that part of the world, it's a beautiful part of the world, firstly, but so much of the cold air just comes down the hill. So how you plant your vineyard, how you set up the vineyard is crucial ultimately to the success from a growing perspective and from a ripening perspective. And they've done a great job where they've actually placed those vines itself.
And they're also on some of the steepest vineyards. Most of their vines are the steepest vineyards in the whole of the UK, which means that the cold air will tumble down through the vineyards and won't stop. What you really have a problem with is when the cold air makes a great big pool of cold air and doesn't move anywhere. And that means that the vines go to 0, to -1, to -2, to -3, and then they just quietly crunch up and the leaves get killed and everything goes badly wrong.
What are your thoughts of the wine from Woodchester Valley Vineyard?
Okay,
I thought that was very good. I thought the sparkling
very
brew.
a trendy pale color. You often get ones with a little more color in the UK, and I'm very happy with that. I think the lovely thing about the UK is that everything is up to make your own decision about. That's why I think of ourselves as one of the newest new world country, because there's nobody who can tell us what we have to do in this country. Every single person, and Jeremy Mount, he's the guy at Woodchester. He comes from the Mount apple growing family. I used to go out with one of his, well, I would like to say his sisters, probably his great aunts, he would prefer to say. I know the mounts. They were all around us where I was growing up in Kent. So he's a fruit person to the tips of his fingers. And again, a winemaker with tons and tons of experience in.
I think what's so lovely is that Jeremy, Sergio, and I were all at college together. So it's quite nice that Sergio and Jeremy are kind of going head to head with these wines.
Yeah, this is a much more
great.
classic style than Sergio's.
Okay.
This is a really classic pink sparkling style, which anyone in Champagne would be proud of. I think it's really well done.
Right. Okay, so Oz, could we move on to their Orpheus Bacchus 2018, which we've got here?
I've got it. I was going to make an Orpheus pink, but I think I'll wash my glass actually. Okay.
Oz, what's your view on Bacchus? It's become the still white wine to grow in this country, or still white grape variety to grow in this country.
I think that's
a great choice.
I think that's a great idea. I think that we needed something genuinely different, and that lets us have it. I don't think Bacchus is probably the greatest grape variety in the world. I think it's a sugar machine. It's a German sugar machine. It was invented in Germany to give you lots and lots of sugar and disease resistance, to make cheap German wine. It wasn't invented to make wonderfully elegant, beautifully ethereal white wines. But Germany's warmer, Germany's sunnier than England, and therefore at the moment there are numerous parts of the UK where that delicate ripening, that just creeping to ripeness is possible. And I think Bacchus can make a completely delightful and hedgerow fresh modern wine. But
let's thank the Germans for this, because I think that we've tried several Bacchus wines, and I think they've all been different, but I think they've all been extremely good. You know, and I think it's a great variety that we should be embracing, because
Charlie,
it's not particularly well known, but Bacchus. Then keep embracing the whole English wine thing, because this I think is a great glass of wine, and I hope we'll receive much more of this on our shelves, be it in our specialist wine shops or supermarkets.
I'm absolutely certain we will, because Bacchus is
so am I.
It's an easy name, Bacchus. It's the god of wine. People get it. Bacchus sounds nice. It's very English. I think what we'll also find is that as global climate change warms Kent and Sussex and the Thames Valley and these places up, heading north, the best Bacchuses will go on coming from Lincolnshire and from Derbyshire and from Yorkshire and all the way up. And Bacchus has got a really good long-term life in the UK, but I don't think that it's suitable to really hot vintages as much as it is to slightly cooler vintages.
So touching on the climate change issue, do you think therefore we're going to see more Rieslings? Do you think we're going to see more still Chardonnays? Do you think is that the future?
I think that Riesling is going to be a problem because it's a strange grape. It seems to have a very curious ripening cycle. We should say, because of the coolness, it'll work. But you talk to people like Denbies, who've really tried with Riesling, and the one or two others who've really tried with Riesling, and I think they say it never quite gets there, even in our really nice Septembers and Octobers. And we now have really warm Septembers and Octobers. Last year was most unusual. A lot of winemakers that I know said they'd never done a wet harvest before, because every September is hot. Nearly every October is hot. But I think that I'm not sure that Riesling is going to work, but there are grapes like Pinot Gris, Pinot Blanc. There is Albarino now being planted in. It's really nice. I think there's Sauvignon Blanc. I mean, Woodchester make a really nice Sauvignon Blanc. And you'd think, I would have said 10% Sauvignon Blanc blended with Bacchus from Woodchester would be an absolutely stonking wine. Flint in Norfolk are already doing that, blending Sauvignon Blanc and Bacchus. And if you think your Bacchus is getting a bit fat and soft, put a bit of Sauvignon Blanc in.
Yeah. Oz, I think we can...
some great pals of mine over at Welcome Hills Vineyard in Warwickshire, in which I used to be part of. And we used to make, this is Warwickshire, and we could ripen Sauvignon Blanc there. So it makes you think that actually, if we can ripen Sauvignon Blanc, then perhaps, you know, the kind of gooseberry, rich gooseberry, with kind of green pepper.
Yeah. Green
Sauvignon.
pepper, and those things that New Zealand is finding difficult now because it's getting too warm in New Zealand. We can do it instead. And by the way, you did mention is the future on things like still Chardonnay. Absolutely, yes. I think that in the next 5 to 10 years, we're going to make some outstanding cool climate still Chardonnays. We're still only just starting. And I think we're a few years ahead of Pinot Noir. Pinot Noir will be a bit slower. But I have to say that Pinot Noir that Sergio came out of Essex fruit.
Yep, superb.
Essex, you know, reminds us again and again, Essex and Pinot Noir made for each other.
So to finish our gallop, Oz, we're going to go down for
Oh.
M4, down the M5, crossing the Tamar, where certain people dread crossing the Tamar. As a guy who loves Cornwall, we were discussing Cornwall earlier on, and its golf courses and its beaches, but also we were discussing the climate down in Cornwall. And a good Cornish day can include all 4 seasons, can't it? But this wine that we're going to now, Paul Goon, comes from near St Michael's Mount, near Penzance. And the first one I'm going to try is Sauvignon Blanc Sparkling Vintage 2016. So let's get stuck into this.
Get stuck into that.
I've always been quite interested with the, I'm not sure what your view is, Oz, on the difference between latitude and temperature. I know that's kind of a big question, but you go down to Cornwall and you're in the Lizard Peninsula, that's below 50 degrees.
Yeah, it's the only place in the UK that is.
But often the temperatures aren't necessarily super high. I wonder how the flowering is affected, how the ripening period is affected. You wonder if Cornwall, although cooler, could be a great place to grow more fruit.
I think that the thing about Cornwall is that it's more maritime than almost anywhere else. North to South Cornwall is just a hop and a skip some of the time.
Yeah.
And although a warm Cornish day can get extremely hot, and if you're in somewhere like the Darniboll vineyard outside Camel, or the Camel vineyards on the Camel Valley, you can absolutely boil there. But honestly, Bodmin Moor is only 2 or 3 miles away out there, and that is cold and windy. And the North Cornwall coast is only a few miles down there, and that is, you can see the rain sheeting across. I've stood on the beach in North Cornwall in glorious sunshine, and you think, here we go. And honestly, a storm is coming in, and it comes from nowhere.
Yeah.
So I think that latitude is not massively relevant when it comes to this. If you say, do you ripen your best Pinot Noir down in Cornwall at virtually 50 degrees? No, you don't. Essex is much further north than Cornwall, and it's much better for ripening Pinot Noir. Pinot Noir doesn't like damp conditions, it rots. So go to Essex where it's dry. Other things down in Cornwall, it might be warmer down there, but it's wet and it's endlessly humid down there. So you've got to go. I would say things like Sauvignon Blanc again. A classic example. Sauvignon Blanc is the kind of thing that you want to grow there because it can cope.
And Oz, how does this Sauvignon compared with previous Sauvigns? We've had almost a 50-50 split between the Sauvignon, the Chardonnay, and the Pinot Meuniers of this world. It's so nice we've had them.
I think this is an absolutely smashing Sauvignon. Again,
so do I. Yeah. Lovely.
Sauvignon. Sauvigne's problem is it's got lots of flavour and has a personality which the old-fashioned wine buffs can't stand. My personal feeling is that's exactly why it's good. And at the moment we're in a situation in England being able to say anything goes. And we've got lots and lots of Sauvignon. Every single Sauvignon that we've had on our 3 shows, Kieran, has been, I would say, an outstanding example of Sauvignon. And here's another one. It's got a little bit of age on it. It's got some yeastiness on it, but it's got fabulous. It's got much stronger fruit flavor than if it was made from Chardonnay and Pinot Noir. Now, you might say, I don't want that much fruit flavor. That's great. Then you don't buy a Sauvignon Blanc wine. But I would say that this wine is makes it affordable. because Seyval gives you much more fruit than Chardonnay and Pinot Noir do, and B, it's different. So this is, no one's going to say, oh, that's a bit like champagne. It's not. This is a truly English sparkling wine, and I think really good.
And
Okay,
it's so exciting when and sorry, Charlie, I know we're on to the last wine, but it's so exciting when you think Charmat method, you think pet nats, you think of all the different ways you can produce sparkling wine, and perhaps we just got the perfect vehicle with Seyval Blanc to do so in a way which maybe isn't pretentious, and maybe a way that will crop big, and maybe a way which is value for money for the consumer. Sorry, Charlie.
Yes, because it actually allows the wine merchant, so the winemaker, to have a chance of making a profit. And also because you can do these quick ones like pet nats and Charmat methods, you can actually have a Seyval Blanc out on the shelves in a year. And you can't do that with a classic method Pinot Noir and a Chardonnay. So I would say Seyval Blanc can do all kinds of, it's a jack of all trades and a very good jack of all trades.
Okay, so I was moving on. The Paul Goon Bacchus 2018, our old friend, the Bacchus grape. Let's try our sixth and final one.
That smells good, Charlie.
Yeah, we've got our good old friend Elderflower back, haven't we? I mean, that is really, really good.
I can give you, and the old friend Elderflower is why we drink Bacchus. I think if you start making Bacchus too ripe and too rich, you lose the Elderflower. In which case, then start making Chardonnay. If you can't get your Bacchus fresh, start making something else. Freshness is, to me, everything when it comes to Bacchus.
Yes. Sorry, we've just had a question from Dwight in Brighton. Can you just confirm the winery this Bacchus is from?
This
Paul
one,
Goon. Paul Goon, which is near St Michael's Mount, Penzance in Cornwall.
Yeah, it's right down. This is. There's one small vineyard I've come across even further southwest than this, towards the Minack Theatre, and there are a few vines on the Scilly Islands. But in effect, this is the southernmost and therefore probably the westernmost vineyard in England, if the Cornish allow us to call them English. And
we've now kind of travelled the length and breadth of the country. You know, what's the future of English wine?
Well, one of the things I have absolutely loved as we've gone from Deleinberg up in Gateshead, through your actual estate wine, estate grown wines in Derbyshire, and then right the way down to Essex and down to Sussex and across to London and Gloucestershire and the rest, is that every single winery has made wines genuinely, truly, wonderfully different.
Yes.
There's no sense of homogeneity. There's no sense of, oh, what are we supposed to make? Let's try and make something like the other guys make it. England is making wines, loads and loads of human beings normally, and I know loads of them like we both do, they're normally pretty determined. They're normally pretty standing for their own opinions. And these wines really show it.
And so the future for England, obviously, we're getting many more millions of vines are going into the ground. You know, how do you think we're going to be perceived in the wider world? You know, is this the kind of, I know we've been a producer for a while now, but actually, is this the start of a new dawn where England is kind of taken very seriously as a wine producing country?
Yeah, this is the start. We've been making wines on and off for donkey's years, and in fact been making quite a lot of wines for 30, 40 years, but this is the start. Now, I completely accept that our reputation is going to be led by high quality traditional method sparkling wines, most of them based on Chardonnay, Pinot Noir, Meunier. But the nice thing about our country is that we can do a whole load of other things as well. And because we've now planted so many more vines, I mean, last year, I think we increased the amount of vines in our country in 1 year by about 25%. Goodness knows how many vines have been planted this year. I haven't got the figures yet. So I think that what we're showing is that, unlike, say, Champagne, which is the great sparkling wine area, that's sort of all they do. And that's a strength. But our strength is that we're starting 150, 200 years later than Champagne to try and show what we can do. We need a broader range of products, and we can do really good blended whites and blended reds from the unheralded grape varieties like Bacchus and Rondo and Regent and all these others for £10 a bottle. We can make potentially tremendously exciting Chardonnay and Pinot Noir over the next 5 or 10 years. Still, we've got a whole range of other grape varieties we're only just starting to work on. And when it comes to sparkling wine, from cheap to absolutely top of the tree, we can do it.
So in summary, basically, we've had enormous fun. I can't tell you how much I've learned about English wine. And Kieran, thank you very much as a winemaker yourself for your input. And of course, from dear friend Oz. Now, this is not the end. We've done 3 shows. We're going to do more. So please share this with your mates. And who knows what's going to happen next. But what I do know is, will you all please stay safe next Saturday when things could kick off again. And for now, remain forever thirsty.
Forever thirsty.